Hey, hey, look at me. What's your favorite the world is ending and we all are going to die scenario? Is one of my most weird, uncomfortable, and out of pocket question that I ask my friends randomly because, well, I'm a neurodivergent freak, but also I want to know how a person thinks about the world ending. Is he like all religious about it? Or is he more of a sci fi guy who likes aliens and, I don't know, a meteor or something? After this, if the person answers my first question, my next follow up is, what would your last days look like when all this is happening around you? Some say that they'll be spending it with their loved ones, as if it is not possible right now. Some say that they'll be doing the wildest shit out there, like walking naked on roads, driving on stairs, skydiving, doing that hiking trip. Some say that they would document this very last moment of their life in a notebook, some video, some photos, which I see a very little meaning in it. But the world is ending, so like whatever. For a very large majority, though, I don't get any juicy answers. They just are totally unaware of what they'll be doing when the world is going to end. Can't think of anything specific or juicy. I can just call them basic and move on, but we don't do that here. I feel for most people, though this might sound super woo woo and philosophical, the world has ended a long time ago, ended by mundanity. So for them, this random burst of fire from the depths of Earth, this alien invasion, some rocks falling from the sky, hold no intrinsic fear. Yes, they might fear their death, but they have nothing to live for either. For many, all there is to their life is routine, being in the ordinary, doing your chores, which is not bad, but it's kind of sad, I think. In Carol and the End of the World, our story begins at a point where most pieces of media end theirs. Our story focuses on Carol, a soft, middle aged white woman, never had kids, never got married. Even her parents are so old that they need a caretaker. It focuses on the last 6 months of our dear planet before it collides with this huge blue one in the sky, and everything ever known to humanity just vanishes away in the debris of the cosmic collapse. But despite this being a literal once in a life, or in this case, death time event, the animated series actually completely hard pivots its focus on Carol. She, in a way, is a complete antithesis of the world around her. While her friends, her family, her party sister, and her parents are out there enjoying the wildest of their desires, she desires routine. She wants to stick to her groceries, her clean clothes, her dentist appointment, her bills, her quiet visit at the Applebee's. In this whole world of a drunk club party, she wants to be that girl who is reading a book. In the very beginning of the series, she meets a guy. They go on a date, but suddenly things start getting too serious. This guy wants her to stay with him, to be his true love before the world ends. But Carol wants something else. All she wants is a pretty normal life, not a rom com or a Titanic. So she gets her out of this situation and into the city. If the world was ending in 6 months, would you change your ways of life? Because technically, the world is going to end for you in some decades. You are obviously going to die. But does it mean that everyone has to go crazy, see everything, jump with parachutes, surf a huge tide? Is there no other alternate way of living out your last dying moments? Carol, in an unknowing way, represents this large yet silent majority. People around us who just want to have their morning coffee, a drive down the lane, a job. All they want is to work normally. Speaking of work, Carol sees a woman on this train, a particularly odd sight, because this was a normal woman. She was not going crazy or doing something even closely out of place. It seemed like she was heading to a corporate job in this economy where there is none. Carol follows her and ends up in the distraction, an office corporate desk job simulation, though in real life, for people like her, respectfully mundane and plain. In a way, that's her big tide. That's her Everest hike. That's her party. On 21st December 2012, oh my god, I feel so ancient. Good times though. There was a rumor on a global scale that the world is going to end. It was because the Mayan calendar was going to end its 13th Baktul, which is basically a time period that the Mayan people used. It's like a century, but here the period is of 394 years. The ending of the world was a pretty widespread rumor, with people starting to do old Mayan rituals for the world ending. Many threw the end of the world parties in LA, Las Vegas. People dressed up as zombies and other apocalypse outfits. But there were some extreme ones too who decided that this was not enough and started collecting stuff, built bunkers for the safety of the humankind. There were even vague reports that some suicide squads were conspiring their demise on this day. Seeing all this, NASA even had to run a campaign saying that the world is in fact not ending. And on 22nd December 2012, the 14th Bakhtun started, and everything went normal again. But what if things did not end up as simply as they did in our real life? What if we could somehow see our destiny, our destroyer, from our own eyes, in the sky or on the ground? How would that turn out? Speaking of the sky and big falling rocks, Don't Look Up, the 2020 Netflix film, focuses on this immediate, very visible threat hurtling towards, once again, humanity. But unlike Carol and the End of the World, this film focuses more on the negativity of this, how humans would react to this very immediate threatening situation under the influence of power and money. In this film, we see Dr. Mindy and Kate, two scientists who are very certain that this comet is going to hit the Earth and try to warn it to the people, to the president. But the president downplays it for one of the tech billionaires named, and I might butcher the pronunciation again, Peter Isherell. Peter Isherell. Okay, let it be, I'll just call him Peter. Peter, who wants the access to this comet so he can take out stuff worth trillions from it. This duo decides that they will tell this to the media instead. But this happy, cheerful entertainment industry cannot stand all this grim, even if the Grim Reaper is directly on your face. In this very crucial moment, Kate lashes out, saying that we all are going to die. But instead of this being a very serious concern, the media turns her into a meme. From here, Kate becomes kind of an underdog, the flag bearer of truth, while Dr. Mindy becomes a nationwide sensation, a nationwide known face, but both pursuing the same agenda that we all are going to be gone. But instead of this being the main traction, people form groups. The president asking people to not look up, while Kate having a full concert with celebrities telling people to just look up, turning this very serious problem, which was to be experienced together, into a war of cultures. This is the real focus of the film. In last moments, when we are supposed to come together for the last time in a losing battle, we try to defend our cause till the end. The comet somehow is lesser important than being right. Even though the Don't Look Up and Just Look Up campaign both seem to have a villain and a hero relationship, at the very end, they both are very similar, one side polarizing the other without any real effect. It somehow deals with the right amount of maturity. Personally, I don't feel that our world will be ending like Carol. No, it will be more like Don't Look Up, messy, loud, and violent. If you think that's extreme, I have a real life proof. Climate change, no matter if you believe in it or you completely disregard this idea, we can all agree on the fact that something is fucked up. Unlike Don't Look Up, this, in fact, is a very visible change with global temperatures rising, the ice melting, the constant floods, unnatural rain. The world has been changing, and it's not for the good. Many critics say that Don't Look Up is a metaphor for climate change, and I will agree. We are living in an impending doom, and yet no one seems to care. Debates happening on the topic discussing that even if such problem exists, eerily resembles Don't Look Up. Though this apocalypse, unlike a planet or meteorite, is hidden in plain sight, acting as a slow poison. But one thing is for sure, even though we don't have a concrete ultimatum till now, if things go in the way they are going, our future generations will surely be having a 6-month ultimatum. Thinking of a dystopian future, how would our life look like when we all are about to be wiped out by some natural calamity or pandemic, which are very real possibilities. Would we be fighting over bread, or would we be climbing the Everest? Would we be fighting for some drops of fresh water, or would we be finding a new planet? Would any record of a living world, our memories, our collective culture, pop icons, the memes that we share, the things we laughed at together, the universal use of emojis, the seven wonders of the world, the forests, the trees, would anyone dare to keep a record of this all? In Season, A Letter to the Future, you play as a young girl who has to fulfill hers and her late father's dream of documenting the world. But this time, there's a concerning twist. Your friend is plagued with this vision of some distant future, and as it turns out, you tell this to Elder Frances. She immediately understands that the end of season is near. Seasons in this game are eras in time, and when they end, entire communities, generations lose all their memory of the previous one. There is also this group who is trying to evoke the god of forgetting, the void, to erase all the memories of all the people, as it has been plagued with the trauma of war. And now it is upon you to document all this beauty, the little lives of people of Tang Valley, their only living memory. With your delicate notebook, a camera, and a recorder, recording an artist's near to loss art, the grief of a child for his late father, the beautiful song of the memory flower, the trauma of the war, snippets of our lives as much as possible before everything is gone. So now you step on this journey of recording all the happenings that you could experience in your little steps. This is a game that I would consider to be a cozy play. The games you play when the outside is just right, the right temperature, the right rain, the right snow. At the very beginning, your mother gives you a pendant, something that would keep your memory intact when the seasons are about to change. But there's a very important choice that you have to make, just like a real life. In the end, at the workplace, Carol finds her people, her friends, in a way, and makes this world a little more livable, ironically, in this moment. She goes on with what you consider to be mundane tasks, but for her, it is adventure, like getting office supplies by pretty violent means or going on a hike with her sister. She finally makes the office her home, unknowingly connecting people over some beer, entertainment, and natural human connections. As the season is about to end and the ultimate demise comes nearer, she actually makes her life more lively, which is completely missing from the first episode. The season ends with all the people in the distraction crying, not over the planet, but over what they'll lose, what they'll miss when everything is gone. In Don't Look Up, the plan of Peter to mine the comet gets completely destroyed and goes horribly wrong. Now, the comet being in an 100% complete collision course with our planet, he, with the other powerful billionaire people, flees the planet on their multi-million-dollar space shuttles, as they seem to be the only one worthy of living, according to them, of course, very eerily similar to the real world. Peter even taunts Dr. Mindy that, according to his technological calculations, there is no chance that he'll be spending his last moments with his family. But against all odds, he enjoys the Last Supper with his family and Kate. And I noticed for the very last time, when everything is going to end, when everything is going to be destroyed, people of all sides, colors, and personalities finally see, finally see a planet own the very last moments of ours, feel every second of it collectively. I hope of a dystopian future where, at least at the very end of our world, we could finally see it as our, not your, not mine, just our. At the very end of Seasons, a letter to the future, as you're finally recording all the grief, the hope, the art, the various people, their personalities, the landscape and its significance, the gods and their magic, you see that the time is near. That now, after you have recorded everything that you could, it's time to make the choice. The choice of remembering everything while the world forgets the past, remembering the voice of your mother, the voice of your father, the smell of home, the breeze of the valley, or not using the pendant, forgetting everything, and living all your memories vicariously through your own entries. Though both the endings lead to the same kind of result, the emotion of each unique to itself, which makes me question, would you still live all your memories knowing that one day you are going to die? You will forget them all, but when the bugs eat your brain, they'll be able to experience all of your emotions. The nutrients that the soil consumes from your body, holding each part of you, the thing that made you, now being the part of the universe. When the world ends, for some it will be war, for some a natural disaster, some pandemic, and for many lucky ones, a plain old death. But in all this, we collectively see ourselves, our existence as one. When the world is ending, let us be picking flowers in the garden, going on that hike, parting together, having dinner, meeting our loved ones once. Because we have two worlds. The bigger are personal and the smaller are external. And we won't let it die before the other one. Let the collective funeral of our memories be a party of our existence and not a mourning of our demise.